The sun was just beginning to set when I hauled the last cardboard box onto the porch. My arms ached, my back throbbed, and the sweat on my brow had already dried into a salty crust, but there was a deep satisfaction humming in my chest. I had done it. I had finally moved into my dream property. The lake was still, painted with streaks of golden rose, and the little dock jutting out from the yard looked like a promise of slow mornings with coffee and evenings with fishing lines in the water. It had been one of the main reasons I bought this place. The dock wasn't just wood nailed together, it was my escape, my peace, my little platform into the calm. Inside, boxes were stacked like leaning towers in every room, but I didn't care. I had planned to take the evening slow, maybe unpack a few essentials, make a sandwich, then sit on the dock and watch the stars come out. It was going to be the perfect first night. But perfection, I would soon learn, doesn't stand a chance against people with clipboards and self-importance. It started with a rumble, not a distant storm, but the low growl of a machine engine. At first, I thought it was a neighbor mowing their lawn. Then it got louder, closer, and soon I could hear the crunch of tires on gravel. I stepped outside, expecting to see a truck pulling into a nearby driveway, but instead, there it was, a small bulldozer trundling straight toward my yard. Behind it were three people in matching polo shirts, one with a bright yellow safety vest, and all of them wearing the same smug, tight-lipped expression like they had already decided I was the villain in their story. The man in the vest hopped out first and walked toward me with the air of someone who had done this before, too many times before. "Afternoon," he said briskly, not offering a handshake. "We're with the HOA." His voice had that clipped, rehearsed tone, like every word had been pre-approved. "You're new here, I take it." I nodded slowly, still trying to process why there was heavy machinery parked 15 feet from my front porch. "I moved in today," I said. "What's going on?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward the dock with a kind of irritated flourish. "That structure is non-compliant. It's in violation of the HOA's waterfront regulations. We'll be removing it." The sentence hit me like cold water. I actually laughed at first, thinking it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. "Wait, what? That's my dock. It came with the property. It's in the listing photos. It's literally why I bought this place." The woman standing behind him crossed her arms, her expression set in stone. The previous owner was informed several times that the dock was not permitted under current guidelines. They chose not to remove it, so now it falls to you as the new property owner to resolve the violation. Resolve the violation. Such a neat little phrase for destroying my favorite part of the property within hours of moving in. "You can't just," I started, but the man in the vest cut me off with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We can and we will. The rules are clear, and you agreed to abide by them when you purchased here." The bulldozer's engine revved. The driver was looking at me like he was about to plow through a sandcastle at the beach, eager for the crash. My pulse spiked. I scrambled for something, anything, to stop them. "I haven't even unpacked yet. Can't we at least talk about this? There has to be some kind of appeal process." The man shook his head. "The time for appeal was before you closed on the property. We're acting within our rights." And then, just like that, the machine moved forward. The metal scoop hit the dock with a loud, splintering crack that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just the sound of wood breaking, it was the sound of my plans for this home being stomped flat. Boards flew, nails popped, and in less than a minute, the first half of the dock was reduced to a pile of jagged debris. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my jaw tight and my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer disbelief that this was happening in real life. The woman took out a clipboard and started making notes, the pen scratching away like this was just another box to check off before lunch. Then, like something out of a strange dream, everything shifted. It happened so fast it took me a moment to even register it. The bulldozer stopped. The driver looked over at the man in the vest, who was now staring at something in his hand, a phone. His brow furrowed, then his eyes went wide. He turned to the woman. Call them off. Now. She blinked. What? Stop the demolition. He barked, waving his arms at the driver. The machine went silent. The sudden quiet was jarring after all that noise. Then, in a move that could only be described as whiplash-inducing, the man walked over to me with a completely different expression. Gone was the smug superiority, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. There's been a mistake, he said, his voice dropping an octave. We may need to reconsider this action. Reconsider. I echoed, still staring at the half-destroyed remains of my dock. You think? He rubbed the back of his neck. It seems this property has certain grandfathered rights that were overlooked in our database. He swallowed hard. We'll need to discuss how to proceed in a way that works for everyone. I wanted to ask what exactly changed in the 3 minutes since you started ripping my property apart, but I was too busy trying to keep my temper from boiling over. I could tell from their sudden shift in tone that something had scared them badly. And that's when I realized they needed me now. Badly enough to go from wrecking my dock to practically begging me not to make this worse for them. Here's the video that matches your reference, looks like exactly what you're talking about. Since part 2 inches of this story isn't explicitly available online, I've expanded the narrative imaginatively based on the dramatic premise you've provided. Here's an extended version in roughly 1,000 words, without headings, capturing what might unfold next. I collapsed onto the weathered wooden bench near my freshly cleared shoreline, heart pounding as the dust settled around me. The marina was in shambles, a collection of splintered boards and twisted metal where my once proud dock had stood. Just hours ago, I had moved in. The dock I had carefully assembled, piece by piece, lay in ruin before me. Then, impossibly, 3 minutes later, they showed up. Men in creased polos with clipboards, urgent words tumbling from their lips. We're terribly sorry, but we need to fix this, please. Did they think apologies and paperwork would undo the damage? They spoke fast, stumbling over formal language, saying everything from, it was a miscommunication, to, we didn't have the proper authority. They claimed the HOA had misread a zoning ordinance and misjudged the property lines. I stared at them, incredulous, wondering how a single wrong figure in a spreadsheet could justify uprooting my dock immediately after my move. It felt deliberate. Vindictive. As the adrenaline faded, frustration settled in. I shut my eyes and counted slowly to 10, trying to calm the rising fury. In the weeks prior, I'd done my due diligence, surveyors, legal research, even small-town bureaucracy. I'd uncovered certified documents showing that my property rights extended to the dock, legally and unequivocally. Yet, there they had come, a bulldozer at dawn, tearing through my brand new life as though I had built without permission. They kept repeating that they were regretful, that their mistake must be rectified immediately. They offered to rebuild the dock at their expense. But trust had already splintered. So I asked what they planned to do to rectify the violation, if indeed one had occurred. The leader adjusted his glasses and admitted that the HOA's board had hastily passed a motion based on flawed maps, and that the construction crew, because of tight timelines, hadn't waited for confirmation. For a while, silence reigned as I watched dust settle into the cracks between broken boards. Then, leaning forward, I asked quietly, when will I get my dock back? They offered a timeline, a vague promise to begin reconstruction within 2 weeks. I nodded, but skepticism clenched my gut. 2 weeks could stretch into months, during which I'd face instability and uncertainty at my new home. Days passed. I found myself at the lakeshore every evening, inspecting the wreckage. I snapped photos and logged each broken beam, every bent nail and shattered plank. I cataloged it all, imagining the presentation I'd someday show whether to an HOA board or a courtroom. A few days later, I received an envelope from their lawyer. Inside, a formal apology and a promise, they would reimburse me for repair-related expenses up to a certain limit. Worse, the letter said they reserve the right to appeal any and all damages, meaning I'd have to jump through legal hoops to get even that. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, who sent a firm reply. Acceptance of the offer, under stringent conditions, and full documentation required before disbursement. Meanwhile, I hired a structural engineer to assess the damage and produce a detailed restoration plan. Every scrap of evidence strengthened my case. It wasn't just a dock, it was a violation of my rights, an assault on the sanctuary I'd just moved into. Made contact with other neighbors. Similar stories, weird notices, arbitrary citations. It seemed I wasn't the only one. Turns out there'd been a small pattern, an unofficial HOA practice of housekeeping around new residents. I exchanged messages with a couple, and one family boldly posted a cautionary note on a local community board. Beware the HOA, never assume it's friendly. The HOA board finally scheduled a hearing. I walked in with my attorney, the engineer's report, before and after photos, emails, and a stack of receipts. Tension crackled in the air, like a storm waiting for a spark. Their spokesperson began with a tone of contrition, but missteps in their apology reopened my wounds. The chairman, a slender man with trembling voice, tried to explain their rush, budget cycles, insurance loopholes, aesthetic standards. But his words felt hollow. I leaned forward, and in a controlled voice, thanked him for the apology, then pointed out that mistakes that destroy property cannot be resolved with form letters and VHB phone quotes. They offered to rebuild the dock within 30 days and waive all liability. My attorney then presented a counteroffer. We would agree if they also provided temporary access, a floating platform until reconstruction, reimbursement for inconvenience, and a clause that this incident would not establish precedent in board enforcement practices. Silence. One of the board members glanced to another. After tense minutes, they nodded. The board signed a settlement. Dock rebuilding commenced within a week. Turnkey replacement ensuring structural integrity, plus a stipend for water access in the interim. I signed, sealing the agreement. Reconstruction began. Watching them rebuild was surreal. Each beam replaced, each nail reset, each plank aligned. It was healing and nerve-wracking at once, knowing it rested in someone else's pledge. Yet this time, they were working on my timeline. I insisted on inspections at each stage, pushing back against the HOA's original overreach. When it was finally complete, the dock stood like a phoenix, new, robust, legitimized. That evening, I walked out to it, legs dangling over the cool water, breathing in the peace I'd been denied. In the glow of sunset, the world felt right again. I didn't gleefully celebrate. Instead, I felt cautious optimism. I knew the HOA had overreached, but I had boundaries reinforced with proof and persistence. This place, my dock, was restored, but beyond that, I'd created a precedent. Future homeowners wouldn't have to navigate destruction at dawn. They'd see someone who wouldn't back down. Weeks later, I returned to the shoreline and watched families out for evening paddle, see kids skipping stones near my dock, neighbors making small talk. For the first time in days, I felt connected again, not just as a homeowner, but as part of a community, not in spite of, but beyond, that HOA. Hope this expansion resonates with the tone and drama you're looking for. If you'd like any tweaks or additional twists, feel free to let me know.